In the beginning, a woman enters marriage as herself whole, expressive, filled with opinions, dreams, and a natural way of being that feels effortless. She laughs freely, speaks her mind without overthinking, and moves through life with a sense of identity that is not yet shaped by expectation. There is a lightness in how she shows up, a confidence in her voice, and a quiet certainty in who she is. But somewhere along the way, often so subtly that it goes unnoticed, a shift begins to take place. It doesn't arrive as a command or a rule. No one explicitly says, "Be less of yourself." Instead, it unfolds through small, repeated moments. A comment that suggests she is too much or too sensitive. A disagreement that turns tense, teaching her that peace comes at the cost of silence. A situation where expressing her truth leads to distance rather than understanding. And without realizing it, she begins to adjust, not all at once, but piece by piece. She starts choosing her words more carefully. She softens her tone even when she feels strongly. She lets certain thoughts go unspoken, convincing herself they are not worth the conflict. What once felt natural, her honesty, her openness, now feels like something that needs to be managed. Over time, these adjustments become patterns. Patterns become habits. And habits quietly reshape identity. The roles begin to take over. She becomes the one who keeps things together, the one who avoids unnecessary tension, the one who ensures that everything runs smoothly. She steps into being the supportive partner, the understanding listener, the emotional stabilizer. And while these roles are not inherently wrong, they slowly start replacing something essential, her unfiltered self. The more she leans into who she is expected to be, the further she drifts from who she naturally is. What makes this shift so powerful is its invisibility. From the outside, everything may look stable, even ideal. She is fulfilling her role, maintaining harmony, doing what is expected. But internally, there is a quiet disconnect forming, a sense that something is being held back, that parts of her are no longer fully expressed. It's not loud enough to disrupt the relationship, but it's strong enough to be felt in moments of silence, in the pauses where she wonders when she last spoke without hesitation. And this is how self-expression slowly transforms into role-playing, not through force, but through adaptation, where being loved becomes subtly tied to being less of who she truly is. As the relationship deepens, a woman's natural ability to sense and respond to emotions often becomes one of her most defining roles within the marriage. She can feel the shifts in mood, the unspoken tension, the subtle changes in tone that others might miss. This emotional attunement is not something she forces, it's instinctive, almost automatic. In the beginning, it creates connection. It allows her to support, to nurture, to understand her partner in a way that feels deeply meaningful. But over time, this same sensitivity can begin to turn inward in a way that slowly silences her own voice. She starts to notice how certain words affect the atmosphere. A direct opinion might create distance, a disagreement might lead to withdrawal or conflict. And because she values connection, she begins to adjust. Not out of weakness, but out of care. She softens her thoughts before speaking them. She edits her emotions to make them more acceptable. She chooses timing carefully, sometimes delaying what she truly feels until the moment passes entirely. What begins as consideration gradually becomes self-suppression. This shift is rarely conscious. She may not even realize it's happening at first. It feels like she's being thoughtful, like she's protecting the relationship, like she's doing what love requires. But the cost of that constant adjustment is subtle and cumulative. Each time she holds back a truth, each time she minimizes a feeling, each time she prioritizes emotional harmony over personal honesty, a small part of her expression is set aside. Over time, those parts begin to add up. She becomes skilled at maintaining peace, but less connected to her own emotional clarity. She knows how to read the room, but not always how to fully honor what she feels within it. Her empathy, once a bridge for connection, becomes a filter that reshapes her voice before it ever reaches the surface. She begins to carry both sides of the emotional dynamic, managing not only her partner's feelings, but also adjusting her own in response to them. And in doing so, her internal world becomes quieter, more contained, more controlled. The most difficult part is that from the outside, this can look like harmony. The relationship appears stable, conflicts are minimized, and everything seems to function smoothly. But internally, there is a growing imbalance. She is present, but not fully expressed. She is connected, but not completely seen. And in that quiet adaptation, her empathy slowly shifts from a source of connection into a mechanism of self-silencing. Beneath the surface of this silence, there is often a deeper force at work, an unspoken fear that begins to shape what is said and what is withheld. It's not always conscious, and it doesn't announce itself clearly, but it lives quietly in the background of the relationship. The fear is simple yet powerful. If I fully express myself, will I still be loved the same way? And that question alone is enough to make someone hesitate, to pause before speaking, to choose connection over authenticity without even realizing the trade being made. In marriage, emotional bonds become deeper, and with that depth comes a sense of attachment that can feel both comforting and fragile. The relationship becomes a central part of identity, a place where love, security, and belonging are tied together. But when that sense of connection begins to feel dependent on maintaining harmony, something shifts internally. A woman may begin to sense that certain truths could disrupt that harmony, that expressing certain feelings might create distance, tension, or even rejection. And so without being told directly, she starts to self-censor. She thinks before she speaks, not just to be thoughtful, but to be safe. She measures her words, filters her emotions, and sometimes chooses silence over honesty. Not because she has nothing to say, but because the cost of saying it feels uncertain. This creates an internal split. On one side, there is what she truly feels, her raw, honest thoughts, her needs, her boundaries. On the other side, there is what she allows to be expressed, carefully shaped, softened, adjusted to fit what feels acceptable within the relationship. Over time, this gap widens. The more she prioritizes maintaining connection over expressing truth, the more she distances herself from her own voice. She may still appear engaged, present, even loving, but internally there is a quiet tension, a sense that something real is being held back. And the longer this continues, the more natural it begins to feel, as if this filtered version of herself is simply how relationships work. What makes this dynamic so powerful is that it doesn't require control or force from the outside. It is sustained internally, driven by the desire to preserve love and avoid loss. But in trying to protect the relationship, she slowly begins to disconnect from her own authenticity. And in that silent trade between truth and attachment, authenticity is often the first thing quietly sacrificed. What makes this silence even more complex is that it often doesn't begin in the marriage itself. It begins much earlier, rooted in patterns formed long before the relationship ever started. Many women carry emotional imprints from childhood that quietly shape how they show up in love. If at some point in their early life, they learned that expressing certain emotions led to rejection, tension, or disapproval, they may have adapted by becoming more agreeable, more accommodating, more focused on keeping peace. These patterns don't disappear with age, they evolve, and in marriage, they resurface in ways that feel familiar but often go unrecognized. So when conflict arises, or when there is a moment that calls for honesty, those early patterns are triggered. Instead of responding purely from the present, she may respond from a place that has been conditioned over years to avoid, to soften, to stay quiet in order to maintain connection. It feels natural, almost automatic, because it has been practiced for so long. She may not even realize that her silence is not just about the current moment, but about a deeper, learned response that once helped her feel safe. This is where the insight becomes powerful. The silence is not simply about weakness or lack of voice. It is about adaptation. It is about a system that learned to prioritize emotional safety over self-expression. In childhood, this may have been necessary. It may have protected her, helped her maintain connection, or allowed her to navigate complex emotional environments. But in adulthood, especially within marriage, that same pattern can begin to limit her. What once served as protection now becomes restriction. The challenge is that these patterns are deeply ingrained. They operate beneath conscious awareness, influencing reactions, decisions, and communication in subtle ways. She may find herself holding back without fully understanding why, or feeling discomfort when trying to speak up, even when she knows her voice matters. There is an internal conflict between the desire to be authentic and the instinct to stay safe. And until this pattern is recognized, it continues to shape the relationship quietly, reinforcing the cycle of self-suppression. But awareness changes everything. The moment she begins to see that her silence is connected to something deeper, she gains the ability to question it, to challenge it, and to slowly create a new way of responding. She begins to understand that what once protected her is no longer necessary in the same way. And in recognizing these hidden patterns, she takes the first step toward breaking them and reclaiming the voice that was never truly lost, only carefully hidden. Over time, when self-expression is repeatedly softened, filtered, or set aside, something deeper begins to happen internally, a gradual disconnection from one's own voice and identity. It doesn't occur all at once. There is no single moment where a woman suddenly feels lost. Instead, it unfolds quietly through small, consistent acts of self-suppression that seem insignificant in isolation but become powerful in accumulation. Each time she chooses silence over honesty, each time she prioritizes harmony over truth, a subtle distance forms between who she is and how she shows up. At first, she may still feel connected to her desires, her opinions, her inner clarity. But as the pattern continues, those signals begin to fade. Decisions that once felt intuitive now feel uncertain. She may pause longer before answering simple questions, not because she doesn't have thoughts, but because she is no longer fully in touch with them. Her responses become shaped more by what will maintain peace than by what feels true. And gradually, the line between authenticity and adaptation becomes blurred. This internal shift can be deeply confusing. She may sense that something is missing but struggle to name it. There is a quiet emptiness, a feeling of being present in her life but not fully expressed within it. She fulfills her roles, meets expectations, and maintains stability, yet there is a subtle disconnection that lingers beneath the surface. It's not that she has lost herself entirely. It's that parts of her have been set aside for so long that they no longer feel easily accessible. The most challenging part of this experience is that it often goes unnoticed by others. From the outside, everything may appear normal, even successful. But internally, there is a growing gap between her external life and her internal truth. She may begin to question her own preferences, her own needs, even her own identity. What I really want? What do I actually feel? These questions, once simple, now require effort to answer. And yet, even in this disconnection, something remains intact, a quiet awareness that there is more within her, something real that has not disappeared but has simply been overshadowed. That awareness becomes the beginning of reconnection. Because once she recognizes the distance, she can begin to close it, slowly reclaiming the parts of herself that were set aside. And in acknowledging this gradual loss, she opens the door to rediscovering her voice, her truth, and the identity that was never gone, only waiting to be heard again. At some point, after all the quiet adjustments, the filtered words, and the gradual disconnection from her own voice, a moment of awareness begins to rise. It doesn't always come suddenly. It can build slowly through small realizations, a growing discomfort, or a quiet sense that something within her is no longer aligned. She starts to notice the gap between what she feels and what she expresses, between who she is and how she shows up. And once that awareness takes root, it becomes impossible to ignore. She begins to question the patterns that once felt normal. Why do I hesitate before speaking? Why do I feel the need to soften my truth? Why does maintaining peace feel more important than being fully myself? These questions are not signs of rebellion, they are signs of awakening. They mark the moment she turns inward, not to suppress, but to understand. She starts to see that the silence she has carried was not weakness, but adaptation. It was something she learned, something she practiced, something that once made sense, but no longer serves her in the same way. This realization is powerful, but it is also challenging. Reclaiming her voice requires her to step into unfamiliar territory. It means speaking even when it feels uncomfortable, expressing thoughts without over-editing, and allowing herself to be seen fully, without the safety of constant adjustment. There may be fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of how the relationship might change. But alongside that fear is something stronger, the desire to feel whole again. As she begins to express herself more honestly, something shifts internally. Her voice, once quiet, starts to regain strength. Her thoughts become clearer, her boundaries more defined, and her sense of self more grounded. She realizes that true connection cannot exist without authenticity, and that a relationship built on silence is not as stable as it appears. Instead of disrupting love, her truth begins to deepen it, or reveal where it was never fully supported to begin with. This awakening is not about rejecting marriage or disconnecting from her partner. It is about redefining the foundation of the relationship. It is about creating space where both individuals can exist fully, where honesty is not feared, and where connection is strengthened through truth rather than maintained through silence. And in choosing to speak, to express, and to reclaim her authentic self, she discovers that her voice was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to be the very thing that makes love real.